All right, on this episode of Bouts Talking Bouts, we had a big year in Canadian mixed martial arts. A lot of great events, a lot of fighters making huge impressions, a lot of great prospects on the come up. And I thought to recap the year by talking to MMA Empire's Joel Griffith. How's your day going so far there, man?
It's good, man. How about yours?
Oh, I'm doing great. And yeah, just like I said, what a year we had for Canadian mixed martial arts, as you well know. I mean, you're at the forefront of a lot of these big events here. And speaking of big events, I thought we would get the event of the year category kind of going out there. For my money, I was going with Unified MMA 36 as for my favorite Canadian MMA card of the year. I just found so much went down there. I mean, Jake Lindsay making the big impression against Pat Pitlick, getting the guillotine choke in the second round, and then you had that fight with Teddy Ash where he gets the redemption against Dominique Steele. Just really a great card all around, and I thought just a great representation for Unified MMA, which I think is one of the bigger promotions, arguably the biggest show going in Canada right now. So my pick is Unified MMA 36 for the event of the year category. I'm curious, Joel, what the event of the year was for you in your estimation.
Believe it or not, is Unified MMA 36 as well.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it was just kind of a stacked card from top to bottom, really. I think even the amateur fights on it, and like you said, Pat Pitlick and Jake Lindsay was a good fight. Teddy Ash, Dominique Steele too. And not in that fight also was a hell of a fight. And don't forget about Shane Campbell was on there too, and KB Bowler as well. Like it was a stacked card.
Yeah, and the cool thing with KB Bowler and also Graham Park on this card, like both getting, respective wins in their different fights there. And then you see the progression even just a bit later on in the year, now both of them as unified MMA champions. So further underscores your point of even, the undercard being stacked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Graham Park, like I was on there too, and you had Josh McKenzie and Joel Adorsky, another good fight there. Amateur fights, Harley King and Peter Jansen and Aaron Anstill, Matt Clute. Like there's just a lot of good fights on that card, top to bottom, and a lot of good fights as well.
Yeah, a lot of big impressions made for sure, and people can check out some video interviews from that event and some of the recaps over at libertymultimedia.com as well as MMA Empire's website. People can check that out for sure. But, moving on to a different category here, I thought Fight of the Year would be a fitting one, and this was kind of hard for me to exactly nail this one down as far as what my favorite fight of the year would be, but I'm thinking I would have to just edge it to James Clark versus Dave Henry, which took place at BTC 6 Night of Champions in Burlington, Ontario. For me, it was just one of those fights that there were so many like back and forth scrambles, just a real pleasure to watch if you're into, high level, submission grappling and just seeing people transition through the sequences. It was very artful in that regard, and James Clark getting an impressive victory there and really putting his name out there in terms of top flyweights throughout the country. So Joel, I'm kind of curious what your pick for Fight of the Year was.
Yeah, it was. There was a few that it was very tough to pick between. Some of the ones that I was kind of close on were Tristan Connolly versus Dewan Owens at Rise FC4. That was a wild fight. Went almost a full 5 rounds, back and forth. Dario Sinagoga versus Daniel Richard at BFL. I can't remember which BFL it was, but both of them making their amateur debuts, and it went to absolute war. Another one that I think you might have caught as well was Steve McDonald and William Carrier.
Oh yeah, that was a great one.
That was another wild fight, but in the end, Fight of the Year for me has to be Chris Curtis and Matt Dwyer at fight night back in January there. They went 5 rounds, a majority decision for Chris Curtis. Matt Dwyer was certainly bloodied up pretty bad, but both guys just left it all in there. It was just a premier example of elite striking, that match. And I mean, that video as well of Chris Curtis, I think it was slipping on the blood in the cage, that was kind of making the rounds around social media after that fight as well. Kind of spoke to just how good that fight was, really.
Yeah, exactly. And us talking about this also articulates the point of you could really make a case for like most promotions on the Canadian scene putting on a sort of Fight of the Year contender. Like, I mean, you shouted out BFL there, Fight Night, XFFC with the William Carrier Steve McDonald fight, which is actually an honorable mention for me as well, but really just, gets across the point that each promotion has a statement fight that they put on throughout the year.
Oh, 100%, yeah. And you don't really, you never know where it's coming from on the card either. Like, it can be coming from the amateurs, it can be coming from kind of, the prelims, I guess you could say, so to speak. You just don't know where it's coming from. I guess that's the fun of it, too.
Yeah, exactly. And you talk about prelims. One of the great facets of prelims is you can check out, prospective stars who are on the rise and really making big impressions. So to that point, I thought to segue to the prospect of the year category, which, kind of a difficult one in a way. I think there was a few people this year that for me made a pretty big impression and got some things rolling. But one of the guys that I wanted to shout out was T-Shay Guthrow, who I think has really made some big strides. He had a lot of amateur experience heading into the calendar year, made his debut at that aforementioned BTC 6 card, and since then has gone 3-0, cumulatively going 3-0, getting ready to head into 2020 here. But another name is Randy Field, someone really catching my attention as well. Victories over Amanda Borg, and also has W's over some individuals who've captured some, pretty significant hardware. Victory over a former King of the Cage atomweight champion and a veteran of the Ryzen circuit. So T-Shay Guthrow and Randy Field were really making big impressions for me, but also got to shout out Lucas Neufeld as well. I think he's a guy that has really shown great aptitude in the cage and a lot of potential going forward as well. So passing off the baton to you, Joel, I'm curious who your pick for prospect of the year is.
Yeah, like you said, it is a very tough category because there are a lot of guys out there. A couple honorable mentions for me were Melissa Croden. She just made her pro debut back in September for Fight Night, and she is a real deal for sure. She had a good win there in her pro debut, undefeated amateur career. She just seems like no one wants to fight her. She's just that dangerous. She's tall as well. She's a big girl for the bantamweight division. Another one is Saeed Mirzai. 3 fights into his pro career now, 2-0-1, I believe. He just kept coming off in July there. He won the Rise FC title, welterweight title against Nikolai Curry, which was, obviously a big win considering the amount of fights Nikolai had compared to him. He is certainly someone to keep an eye on. But for me, it's kind of a weird one because he only fought once this year, and it was his first fight in over 6 years. But for me, it's Radley De Silva. He just won the Rise featherweight title over John Wynn. Obviously, John Wynn, a very tough opponent, and Radley. I don't know if you haven't heard of him. A lot of people are saying he's kind of BC's hidden secret, and I witnessed firsthand why at Rise FC5 there last month. He's the full package. He's kind of supposed to be known for his striking because of his capoeira background. But in that fight with Wynn, he barely had to use that. He used his wrestling, and his jiu-jitsu to get the win through by submission.
Yeah, that's a good shout out, and it kind of underscores the idea that prospects can come in all shapes and sizes. This very much, like you said, a guy who was inactive for a meaningful period of time, but at the same time comes back and has a very emphatic performance that gets him on a lot of people's radar in a big way. So maybe he'll kind of stop being that hidden secret, so to say.
Yeah, and it was just going into that, I was just so intrigued to see him fight because obviously, he comes from Tristan Connolly's gym. That's one of his gyms. And talking with Tristan, he had the praise that he had for him was like nothing I've heard before. Like he was talking like he was going to be like he's the next big thing in Canada. Like, and I was just so excited to see what the hype was all about. And the hype is real. Like, and he is the real deal. And the reason he took so much time off when I talked to him was he wanted to mature as a fighter. He started fighting professionally when he was 18, and so he took some time off, matured physically and mentally, and he said he's back now. He's back permanently, and he's looking to defend his title as soon as possible, potentially in February.
Yeah, absolutely. Great shout out there. Radley De Silva for Prospect of the Year. Definitely a good solid pick. And for clarification purposes, my pick for Prospect of the Year was Randy Field. But you also mentioned a name in there, Tristan Connolly, who I think very much made a huge impression this year for sure. And in saying that, moving over to Fighter of the Year category. So this was kind of a hard one for me. I kind of looked at it almost in a twofold sort of way. Tristan Connolly very much fits the bill in a certain way for me for Fight of the Year because he did have some notable experience on the regional circuit, got a couple finishes over Zach Jusola and Dwan Owens, and then also that short notice, debut in the UFC against Mikael Pereira, and just, super, super emphatic, very impressive performance, getting himself on that UFC stage and getting a lot of new fans going already. So from that kind of perspective, I think Tristan Connolly very much deserves that sort of recognition. But as far as guys who've specifically just kind of solely plied their trade on the regional circuit in Canada, for my money, I got to go with TJ Laramie because he was coming off of a loss in 2018. He'd kind of needed to regroup for a little while, was out of the cage for, close to 10 months, and then comes back and gets 3 consecutive victories under the PFC banner, and then ends up defeating Andrew Cruz, very tough, durable individual in his last fight, securing the decision victory and capturing some more regional hardware with that PFC featherweight championship. So kind of, like I said, twofold sort of methodology and mentality there with going with TJ Laramie as far as guys solely on the regional circuit, but then also a guy like Tristan Connolly very much can deserve a Fighter of the Year nod in his own sort of regard. So in your estimation, Joel, I'm kind of curious, who do you think deserves the Fighter of the Year distinction on the Canadian scene?
Well, like you said, I guess it is kind of two parts, and I'm on the same boat as you. Tristan Connolly, for me, 100%. It's when you do what he did. He won 3 fights in 2019 and got a UFC debut out of it, and got that win over Michelle Pereira, who obviously was a huge favorite. I mean, the story speaks for itself. Tristan Connolly for me, for sure. But if we're talking, just the regional scene, it was kind of close between two guys. I think Dan Kajic deserves a nomination. Just from what he's done, he won 3 fights in 2019, all finishes under the BFL banner, including a title win and title defense in there. But for me, it has to be KB Bowler. That would be my choice for Fighter of the Year. Strictly on the regional scene, I mean, he comes back in late, I believe it was very late 2018, gets a win there after, over 5 years off, and then 2019 he goes back to work again. 3 wins over, 3 very experienced guys, Derek Boyle, Cody Cron, and probably his biggest win by far, Matt Dwyer at Unified 38. He surely has now put himself firmly on the UFC's radar, and it's hard to find a year that was for a fighter that was kind of bigger than that.
And that's a great shout out too. Also kind of a similar sort of mythos around him as the aforementioned Radley De Silva, just in the sense of out for a meaningful enough period of time, but people who are in the know understand the skills they bring to the table. And I mean, like you said, just some emphatic performances from KB all throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there was a lot of guys that obviously, could be up for the Fighter of the Year for sure. And, but yeah, I just think with KB taking so much time off, coming back, and not taking fights against easy opponents either. He wanted the toughest guys, he got the toughest guys, and he beat the toughest guys.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very well put in that regard. And like you said, I mean, a lot of the guys out there really didn't make it easy, and that's promoters and fighters alike, just in the sense of the Event of the Year category, Fighter of the Year categories, and just a really great year for Canadian MMA overall. But you've been really great with your time, Joel. I'm curious if there's anything else you'd maybe like to add as a parting thought as we're kind of wrapping up, though.
No, I mean, just looking forward to 2020. There's a lot of good events planned, and a lot of good potential fights that are in the works. And I'm just looking forward to seeing what 2020 has.
Yeah, it was a great year, and 2020 is going to be a great time. I'm sure the entire decade is going to be very fruitful for Canadian MMA. Really seems to be getting traction and just only seems to be, getting bigger and better. So again, really appreciate all the time. Joel, thanks for joining me for this Canadian MMA 2019 recap show, and you enjoy the rest of your night, man.
Thanks for having me. You as well.
Be sure to check out MMAempire.ca for future updates on the Canadian MMA scene, and also Liberty Multimedia. You know what to do. We're here. We're posted up. It's Dylan Bowker, Bouks Talking Bouts.